Welcome traders, Adam Harris, Chief Market Analyst here. It is Sunday the 9th of March and I'm just having a look for the week commencing Monday the 10th of March. Let's have a quick look at this economic calendar. So yes, interesting to see how Japan will be looking. I'm expecting some potential possible positive news out of that. The US numbers are going to be very interesting, I think, going forward for the next few months. I'm interested to see how CPI does. Very curious to see what happens with initial jobless claims. I would expect them to go up, but we'll have to just see how that plays out. And then we've got UK GDP, which hopefully will be positive on Friday. So really, those will be the most volatile events this coming week. All right, so looking at the charts, looking at the VIX, we're seeing a bit of an increase in volatility heading up towards 25. As I said to you, I'm not too concerned until we start breaching this 30 level. And just again, as always, excuse me, to give you that perspective over the weekly, this is kind of where we are. We've been there in September, we were there in October, we were there in 2024 in April. So we've been in this area before at the moment. We can see it just starting to head up a little bit higher. Let's see if it continues to head up higher this coming week with all the so-called kind of economic uncertainty around the US at the moment, as well as potential changes in all kinds of things going on at the moment. Let's have a look at this dollar index. So dollar index experiencing a very, very strong drop this week, broke through that level of support back into the range, now sort of closing slightly beyond halfway past the midpoint of this range. I think it's reasonable to expect that this will continue to head down to the other side of the range. We'll see how this coming week goes. My expectation for now is to see a continuation to the downside. So looking for some sort of pullback in the early part of the week and potentially then finishing a little bit lower. But certainly the momentum at this point in time appears to be pointing to the downside, continuation of the weakening of the dollar. Euro dollar finally had a really nice strong breakout. We've been talking about this. I've been talking about this for weeks on end. A lot of the technical signs were there, just waiting to see it happen. And then, of course, it did happen. We had a massive move. And so, again, we're back within the range on euro dollar. For now, I would say definitely that momentum, aside from pullbacks. I'd like to see if we get some pullbacks, potentially back down to 1064. But if that dollar really is weak and the euro really is strong, I would expect a shallower pullback. And then I expect it to attempt to continue back up. Keeping in mind that over here is where we were when the outcome of the US election on the eve of, was it November 8th, 9th? And we could see here that strong reaction, that dollar strengthening. Excuse me, you can see we're almost back up at that particular level now. Very strong weekly candle, so very bullish. But we do need a bit of a pullback before we would continue. So let's see if that's going to be the case. With sterling, strong trend in play. Any kind of a pullback here for me represents a good buying opportunity. We're looking very good. And again, the momentum is more to the upside. So great opportunities with the dollar here. Then we have a look at dollar yen to the downside. Again, what's interesting here, what's slightly different, we've broken through support. We have a lot of wicks underneath here, lots and lots of wicks. So despite the fact that although I would think the Bank of Japan does want the yen to continue to strengthen, it seems to me, especially when I look at the crosses, they're all looking very, very bullish. So I'm actually expecting a bit of a pullback this side, a bit of a strengthening on the, a bit of weakening on the yen this coming week, just based off technicals, not off fundamentals. Dollar Swissy as well. Really nice breakthrough. We can get rid of all these little things now. We don't need those anymore. And here, my expectation again is any pullbacks here should see good continuation opportunities to the downside, especially down towards the bottom of this range. So all of these supporting a weaker dollar. Dollar CAD is a slight exception here. It's got no clear trend at the moment. Broke into a downtrend, then broke that, and now it's just wobbling all over the place. You can see here, looking at the monthly, lots of wicks underneath. So continue just showing that Canadian dollar weakening, but at the same time, not really going anywhere. So it's at a bit of a stalemate. Let's see how that ultimately plays out. Gold. So gold's in a bubble. Now, what does that mean? It means that it can continue to act irrationally. I think it's overextended. I do think it needs to have a correction. But if it's in a bubble, it can just continue to go up. And actually what it looks like it is appearing to do now is finding support where it is, close to the moving averages. So this week I'm going to be looking at this last weekly candle, looking to see if we get a break above the high or a break below the low, or below this 2,850 to see if we get that correction. But right now it looks very much as though it doesn't quite want to quit and it does want to break higher. So the weekly candle is one to watch there. Silver also showing something similar also, so it's looking potentially quite bullish there. We have a look at crude oil. Crude oil is looking relatively weak at the moment. Definitely more pressure to the downside. The momentum is bearish. So what I'm going to be looking for this week is a continuation. All right, a continuation here. Continuation. Should have just done that. There we go. So we've got a nice downtrend in play. If you just look at it in isolation, let's get rid of this silly stuff over here. Really just looking to see if there's a continuation now. And if we break through that support level, I would then expect this to continue to head lower. Overall, it's the monthly level that I'm watching here. Do we break and then continue down to that 60 level? Because if we break that, the drop becomes significant. We start to see it drop down towards $40. So definitely something worth watching if the support level is not going to hold. Let's have a look at the global indices. Global indices trying to hold within that range from a weekly perspective here. We're still trying to find support where we are within a monthly. We really haven't shed that much weight. All right, we're really back into the lows of January, potentially looking at November. We're still in that area. So this week I want to see if these levels hold or do we get a deeper correction. This is a good area for it to find support and ultimately become bullish again. But I do think there's a possibility we haven't quite finished where we are. We could see a bit of a move down to 41,500. Overall, I'm still bullish on the markets at this time. Just worth mentioning the differences. So here we are looking at the S&P breaking out of this range, closing down below that, outside the range, hinting at the point that we're now in a monthly correction down to the downside. And therefore, we could have further downside. It's a very real possibility. And so that's what I'll be looking for here this week. Do we head down to the next support level? Could we finish ultimately with a strong bullish candle? I'm not entirely convinced yet. I feel like we're now in the monthly game, so therefore we're now looking at how March closes versus what we see in April. So definitely we could either go sideways or sideways and down. That's really where this caution comes from. Same thing here with the NASDAQ. It definitely broke outside of the range of the weekly. Therefore, it is now a monthly correction or retracement. The only question is where does it come down to? Is it back down here to 19,400? Does it find support to 20,000? Not convinced that is over yet. Really need to see how March closes and what we get in April. Does March ultimately close back up near the highs or do we continue to move near the lows? Again, I'm looking at this point. I would expect it to continue to test those lows. Russell 2000 back within the range. Okay, back within the range, to me showing back within the range, and therefore further downside is a possibility. The FTSE overall looking really good. I mean, it's battling with the level where it is. Overall, we've got some bearish divergence here on the daily, so I do expect a bit of a correction. For me, the correction would be down to potentially down to that 8475 area of resistance to find support, just back into the old highs here. But overall, the trend of this looking stronger than some of the US indices. Again, here looking at the DAX battling for sure here. This is just increased volatility. This is looking a bit like the S&P did a couple of weeks ago, just all over the place, gapping back and forth. It's definitely struggling. I would say it's coming to the end of its weekly run here. A weekly pullback down towards 22,000 or even as far as 21,000 would be great. A monthly correction down towards the 20,000 level would be amazing. But I think this week I would expect it to stumble more and potentially start to break lower. Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, as we speak, certainly from that weekly perspective, makes sense. This is a real failed attempt to stay above that level, now starting to drip lower. So for me, I'm now expecting Bitcoin to head back down towards 71,000, possibly 70,000. Let's see how that goes. There is a possible level of support in this area where it is. Let's see if that is the case, but I have to say it's not looking good. We had this mention here of the US bringing in a strategic reserve of Bitcoin. The market, that wasn't enough for the market to kind of change its mind, and then it came back up, found resistance again, and is heading lower here. So it almost certainly appears as though further downside is in the future of this, down towards these levels of resistance. Ethereum as well, clearly hitting lower. Breaking, this is interesting. Excuse me, I haven't looked at this since last week. Breaking below the lows here outside of this range. So that's interesting, meaning just implying we've got further downside here. Okay, further downside here. That momentum is nice and bearish. Okay, so this just implying further downside on cryptos. Bitcoin obviously being the stronger of the two, but we'll have to see what happens. That certainly looks like short-term stuff. Apple. So Apple, this chart here, the weekly, is showing some bearish divergence, a lot of sideways motion for now. I expect in the coming weeks and months, possibly months, but certainly weeks, Apple will stay where it is. I'm not really expecting much from it. From a monthly perspective, it's in a really nice, interesting formation. It's forming a wedge. Let me just kind of draw this in. A little bit of a wedge here to the upside, which can often result in just a move. We could see similar to gold. We could see a breakout to the upside here. If we just do this, we could see a breakout to the upside. I'm not convinced it's done yet. This weekly chart shows some divergence. It still has to work that out, so not convinced that's free and clear yet. Microsoft definitely starting to get a bit twitchy around those lows here from a monthly perspective. Not convinced it's going to find support. I think we could see a correction down towards, see a correction down towards these highs over here, potentially 350. So let's move on. Let's have a look at Amazon. Okay, Amazon also coming back down into these highs. This is an area I want to see if we do find some support here. Could it go down a little bit further down towards 175? Yes, it could, but this is a good area for it to potentially find support. So this week, for example, this coming week, I'll be looking to see if we get a nice small green bullish candle here, or do we move right down and close near those lows? But it's certainly, so far, we're looking at the Mag 7 here. It looks like there's that possible potential for further downside. Google, interesting to me here, monthly so far, actually setting up as a higher low, meaning that it's let off that buying pressure and is potentially looking to recover from that. Still, I would see how these levels hold up. Everything else seems to be under pressure. We could very well see if that's going to be the case. Soon going to look and see if this level holds up, or whether we see a break down towards that 153 level. From an investor's perspective, this is fantastic. This is what Buffett's waiting for. This is what a lot of guys and girls and ladies and gents are waiting for, is that just to have a much bigger, deeper correction. We're still sitting near the tail end of last year, and fundamentally there were so many good things about the US economy. Some of those things might be falling apart now, but a lot of them are still intact, and therefore these markets might still have plenty of juice left in them. So I'm not going to jump the gun. All of them, for example, here Meta has been long overdue for a correction, letting off some steam. I'd love to see this pull back down past 600, possibly even as far as down towards the 532 range. Let's see if that's the case. We could finish the end of the week with a very strong bullish candle. Let's see how that goes. NVIDIA, this one looking almost certainly like it has more downside potential here. I would think that what would work for it here would be to pull back into the 100 level at a minimum. Let's see how that works out. Tesla's broken down below this level, so this level of resistance, it's a little bit below that. Still, in theory, as long as it's above these highs, that monthly is still in an uptrend. Okay, this is still bullish. So really, this week, the question for me is, will it manage to recover, close back up above that level of support, which would then imply further upside the following week, or does it end up coming back down to this next level of support? Right now, it's overextended to the downside, so could do with a bit of a pullback, but if it is inherently weak, it will fail to kind of ultimately stay above that level. And if it closes lower this week, then further downside makes way more sense. Netflix, similar to Meta. Netflix is finally starting this. So compare the two quickly. Meta looking here. Netflix and Meta, the two are the strongest right now. They really would benefit from a monthly correction down to the sort of 20 period moving average or the 50 period on that weekly. They really would benefit from it. But of the whole lot, they're still strong. And as I said, if we ended up with a very strong bullish weekly candle on this, I wouldn't be surprised, especially if the market is just looking for the smallest amount of a sell-off on the weekly, and then in order to take a run. So this week showing me some interesting things, seeing a lot of weakness across the board, but also seeing the potential for here to maybe finish a little bit higher. So the weekly candles are going to be quite instrumental here if we do finish with a bullish candle across a lot of the Mag 7 and some of the US indices. If they hold at the levels, then I would expect an attempt following that to make another run for the highs, and we might see a lot of this fear dissipate. However, if we start to break below these lows this coming week, then it becomes, the implication is we're going to see further downside in the coming weeks and or months. At some point, though, I do expect these monthlies to now have had a correction. A few of them managed to dodge a correction. If we go look at the S&P, September should have been a very bearish month. Instead, it was bullish. So we could simply be paying the price for that now. All right. And so, again, we could be seeing a correction back down towards those lows. That's a possibility. But it's a week-by-week scenario. All right. Let's see how this week finishes out. Listen, have a great one, and I will see you next week.